Hello, 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 hello. Happy Monday, everyone. What better topic to discuss than the Last Dance documentary? I'm so excited to speak to you guys about it and go over some of the many, many notes that I've taken on it. We're going to recap all 10 episodes that have happened, like the biggest things, the biggest takeaways from it. The topics we're going to discuss today are what fueled Michael's fire. So what motivated him to become a better version of himself on the court? What kind of like fueled his fire inside him? Two, we have to talk about the flu game. He was so sick, but he still performed and had the game-winning shot. That game. We're going to talk about how no individual is going to be a team. The team. Michael is not the only reason why the Bulls are so successful. It was all the people behind him as well. So talking about each and every one of the players that went into this epic and amazing team. There are so many things we can learn from him. There are so many things we can learn from a bunch of other players as well. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, specifically topic-wise, is the power of a common goal. The power of the fact that this entire team, they were a championship team because they knew they were. They always thought of themselves as a championship team, and that was what was the main reason why they were so successful, is because they all bought into that mentality. So those are the things we're going to talk about today. The thing that they started off last night's episode with that I absolutely loved was they said, no one shares your story. And I thought that was so powerful, because the player you are is because of all the experiences, all of the different things that you've exposed yourself to in the game and with being exposed to other teams and other things. You are who you are, and the faster you can figure out who you are, the faster you're going to elevate yourself to where you want to be. But if you live your life trying to be like someone else, you are not going to be the best version of yourself. You are who you are. And the second you try to play for someone else, you're not playing for yourself. So figuring out who you are is how you're going to be able to play to the best of your ability at all times. So what are some things that fueled Michael's fire? I loved this part. This actually came up in multiple episodes, multiple different scenarios. But one, I remember him specifically. It was like one of the final games. It wasn't in '98. It was a previous year. But there was a player on this team that was probably the best player on the other team, the opposing team. And he actually, I think, ended up being Michael's teammate later. But he was talking smack, okay? Straight up talking smack. Now, a lot of players do that. A lot of players do that because that's their way of kind of like getting in another player's head, right? But this specific player said a couple things, but then Michael like exaggerated the whole thing and like almost made up a story about how the other player was doing all of these things that he wasn't doing, but he created a story in his mind to try to fuel the fire for himself. So it was basically a fight within the fight, if that makes sense. So he made up a fight that didn't actually happen with another team, with another player on another team, so that Michael can show up and play lights out to go beat that player. He made up these things that didn't exist, but he believed them enough to make him want to go out and kick the snot out of the other team or the other opponent. I'm reading Mind Gym every single morning with some of you guys that are actually here, and one of the stories that came up was from Muhammad Ali, and it was about how he was the same way when it came to motivation. He said that there was this bike when he was younger, when he worked. He bought this bike, and he was so proud of that thing, and he loved it. He was proud of it. He saved so much money to buy this when he was young, and someone stole his bike. So Muhammad Ali, someone stole his bike, and he said he spent hours, days, months, weeks trying to find this bike, and he still to this day has not found it. And so just like Michael, Muhammad Ali found motivation in thinking that the opponent was the person who stole his bike. Like, legitimately, that's what it says in this story. He would always think that his opponent that he was against, didn't matter who it was, that was the person who stole your bike. Ooh, I'm coming out to get you. You stole my bike. He's so proud of that, right? So he even Muhammad Ali made up a story about a bike being stolen just to beat the other opponent and just to have that internal fire and the flame of that happening. Another thing they mentioned last night in the documentary was that Michael didn't get the MVP that season where they were playing against the Utah Jazz. It was actually one of the Utah Jazz players that won the MVP that year. And Michael had won like so many, I think like 7 of them in the past, maybe more. So Michael, he did not talk about it. If you guys listened, it was other people that talked about how Michael was pissed, like he was mad. Okay, he was mad that he didn't get the MVP, but he didn't complain about it. Michael did not complain. He simply put it out in the court. He acted upon his anger, right? He felt that he should have been the MVP, and because of that, he went and attacked, played hard against the guy who won the MVP, saying, you know what? If he won it, he's going to have to work for it. That was his mindset. So that was another motivation for Michael, is that he took the other player who won MVP and he was just like, hey, hang on a second. Let's make sure you earned that MVP. And so Michael made it tough on him. Michael showed up at his best because he found motivation in that. So those are a few of the things that really fueled Michael's fire. And so the thing is, Michael knew that he almost had to make up stories to find the fuel. Everybody's different. Everybody finds their motivation differently. But I think it is so ironic that Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali have the same motivation factor. Some people are also motivated by doubt, okay? Like when someone doubts how good they can be, they pull out this little inner edge. I had a coach that told me that when I told him I wanted to play D1, he was like, I don't know if you're going to be able to play that. You may play D3. I don't think that's going to happen for you. And I used his doubt in my abilities to fuel my fire. That was a way that I fueled mine, and my job was to kind of, it sounds bad, but I did want to prove him wrong. I wanted to prove to him that he had no control over where I was going to go. I was going to play D1, and I was going to figure out how to do that. So that was a way that I was motivated. It was by doubt. So however you're motivated, make sure you understand what is that way for you, because that's going to help you fuel the fire when you need it most. Michael had to fuel fires when he was nervous, so he would show up even better than anybody ever expected. So that was how he did it. Okay, so the next topic, the flu game. He did not have the flu. He had food poisoning because there was a pizza place that he ate at the night before, the only place that was open at the time for him to eat. They poisoned his food. Therefore, Michael was getting sick all morning, couldn't keep anything down, and he played this game with food poisoning. Now, this is so important to talk about, because when you are the absolute best at something, people are going to try to pull you down in any possible way that they can. I mean, they were in Utah playing in the championship series, so it was the Utah pizza place that like poisoned him, whatever. No matter who you are, if you are at the top of your game in whatever it is that you do, people are going to try to claw you down and tear you down in any shape, in any way. Whatever it is that you decide to do, you have to know that the higher you get, the higher levels that you get, the harder it is, because so many people who are below you that want what you have but aren't willing to work for it are going to try to tear you down. If you are bullied in any way, shape, or form and people try to tear you down, remember, it's not going to be people that are above you that are going to try to tear you down. It's always people that are envious of you that are going to do that. So that was just like one of those huge things. But let's keep talking about the flu game, because he, no matter what, was going to play that game. His mom was telling him to not play the game, that he had food poisoning. His mom was like, don't do it. This is not good for you. You shouldn't do it. You can't even keep anything down. You have no energy. Don't play. And Michael was like, but wait, what's my one big thing that I'm always going to do? Oh, I'm going to win at all costs. That was Michael's thing. He always said, no matter what, I'm going to win at all costs. And because it was such a severe game, it was a game that they had to win. Michael was like, I'm playing. And did he look like death that entire game? Yep. But here's the thing. Because Michael always gave 100% of what he had, because he always gave it 100% of what he had, he was still better than most people on that court. And he was the one who made that game-winning shot at the very end to win the game. I think they won by 2 that game, I believe, if I read it right. But regardless, even though he was giving 100% of what he had, which what he had might have only been 50%, right? Because he was so sick. he had 50%, but what he did was he gave 100% of what he had, therefore was able to make it through the game and make that shot where it was necessary for him to make it. If you play 100% of what you have, you will walk off that field or that court knowing that you gave it your best. And Michael could say that he did that. Even though he felt like death that day, his team needed him to make that winning shot at the end. He also made other shots that game. But his team needed him to make that shot in order to win. So he knew that he was going to give 100% of what he had. I remember, and I'll keep this short, but I played a game. We played a series in Florida. I think it was for spring break. And we were playing down there for like 3 days or 4 days. And it was like the second day, I got really sick. Like I had a fever, like massive, massive fever. I had cold sweats, like through the night. I was just sweating through everything. It's kind of gross. But I was not feeling well, but I knew that I wanted to play. I was like, I don't care. If I can play, I can play. And they're like, well, I mean, you're not really contagious. You just have a fever. So you can play if you want. And I was like, I'm playing. And so I decided to play, and Scottie Pippen made actually a really good point about when Michael was sick. He's like, when you're sick, you kind of like find that inner thing inside you didn't know you had. I felt that when I was playing down in Florida. And that inner thing that inside you that you have is kind of like you don't really worry about the distractions. You just focus on the one thing and the one thing only that's important, and it's the softball. Okay? Like literally like the ball. So when I was hitting, I wasn't worried about the pitcher, wasn't worried about the defense, wasn't worried about, what was the score. I was just like, nope, I'm just here and I'm going to hit. And it was just like simple. It was easy for me to figure out what was important when I was sick, because I was just like, I'm sick, but I'm here and I'm grateful to be here. Let's go. The next thing that I want to talk about is a quote that they said, I think it was in the second episode, maybe the third. No individual is going to be the team. Even though Michael was as good as he was, he wouldn't have won all the championships that he did. They go into such detail about all of the different players that really made an impact for that Bulls team, especially the 98 team, because it took every single one of them to get to this spot that they were at. I'm about to talk to you about all the people that were on this team, and each of them knew their role, all right? Each of them knew their role. Steve Kerr. I'm saying him first because he's like, I love this guy. Steve Kerr, they said he didn't even like get a college scholarship until the very end of his senior year, and he was just like granted it, and he didn't even think about it. He just went to go play at Arizona because he was offered this scholarship. It wasn't his dream to play college. Well, I don't think it was his dream to play college basketball or even play professional basketball. But when he was granted the opportunity, he took it. So he was not like always like this standout player, yet alone he's playing for the Bulls. But Steve Kerr said he scratched and he clawed for everything that he was given in this game. That means he was staying late after practice to work on some things. He came in early to work on things. He was one of the best three-point shooters in the game. Probably still is. And I think it was like 56% he shot from the three-point line. Like, that's insane. Like, that's absolutely ridiculously good. And he was not born that way. And he had to work and, like you said, scratch and claw for every single one of those opportunities. And one of those opportunities he had was to win the 98 game, to win the championship series against the Utah Jazz. And what was so amazing is, like, I loved this part because even Phil Jackson, their coach, was like, Michael, be ready for this last shot. We need you to make this last shot. And Michael goes over to Steve, or he looks at Steve, and he's just like, Steve, I'm going to make him double team me, and I'm going to throw you the ball. And he was like, okay, I'll be ready. And he's like screaming it, I'll be ready, I'll be ready. And I thought it was the coolest thing, because that exact thing that Michael said was going to happen, happened. And because he spoke it into existence for Steve Kerr to be ready for that shot, he was able to get mentally ready, and he was. And Steve Kerr made the shot, and they freaking win. Like, how cool is that? You are what you speak into existence. So if you say it's going to happen, Steve, be ready for the shot. You're making the shot. Steve has nothing else to think about except making that shot. And he did it. They share that Steve Kerr's dad was murdered, actually. It's a really sad story, but when he was younger. And his mom said that what got him to be so good at basketball is that he put all of his worries into his play. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because if you can take, all the stresses from the worries in your life and kind of just like use the sport as a way to cope and kind of like forget about all the worries and all the struggles, it'll be like, you'll be surprised at how great you can be at this game. The day after the funeral, Steve went back to practice, because that's all he knew. And he's like, I don't want to become lazy if I just stay at home and not know what to do next. So he's just like, I just went straight back to practice and put all of my worries and my struggles into my game. And I was like, we can so relate to this. It's insane. Like, have you ever just, had a bad day and you just wanted to hit some balls really hard off the tee? I know I have. Like, I used to spend so much time in the cages just hitting balls hard, because that was me de-stressing. Me de-stressing was playing softball. So I could relate really well to Steve in that regard, and maybe you can too. Maybe you can use the game as almost like an outlet to not think about all the craziness going on, maybe outside. Do a check-in. Do you need to get away from your phone for a second to stop stressing with all the madness happening? Do you need to get away from the news to distress a little bit? If you do, you have the game of softball, and I guarantee you there are ways that you can get better. There are more people that I wanted to talk about. Dennis Rodman was one of them. All right, so most people, call me crazy, think that Dennis Rodman is insane. He's crazy. You don't want to look up to this guy, but I beg to differ. Even though Dennis Rodman did some things that are questionable, did he ever miss a game? And did he ever not give 100% during that game? No, he always did. And his teammates said that. His teammates were like, okay, yeah, he wasn't at practice, but he showed up at this next game and he went all out and he did whatever it took to win that game. And I was like, this is amazing. So no matter your differences, no matter if you're crazy or weird, I'm weird, awkward, I'm very awkward, whatever it is that you are, it doesn't matter outside the white lines. Like, so if your teammate's off doing something that they shouldn't be, obviously, like, go help them if they need help. But as long as they're getting the stuff, and they're professional athletes, remember this, as long as they're getting what they need to get done on the court or the field done, then you probably don't need to worry about them. He didn't show up to practice during the championship series, which was kind of a big deal. It's a big deal. But they share the fact that even though he does these crazy outside things, he's still himself on the court. And on the court, I'm telling you right now, Dennis Rodman is one of the most selfless players I've ever seen in my whole life. He asked for time off, and he went to Vegas, and didn't come back when he was supposed to. And Michael showed up, knocked on his door. He's like, hey, dude, we need you over here. Hello. We're trying to win ball games, and you're not here. So he kept him accountable. But Dennis Rodman, whenever he showed up on the court, didn't even faze him. Okay, whatever he did, good or bad, off the court, didn't even faze him on the court. He was still selfless. No matter what, he wanted to win just as bad as anybody else on that court, and he did whatever it took to win. So I thought that was a really awesome thing. It's like, no matter what people think of you, it doesn't matter. As long as you show up and do your thing, you're going to be able to help your team win championships, and that's all that really matters. The next person I want to talk about was Scottie Pippen. Okay, Scottie Pippen. They started off the series talking about how they didn't like him because he was being kind of a wuss when it come down to his injury, and he wasn't getting paid enough. Blah 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 blah. But once he got that figured out, I'm telling you right now, without Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan and the Bulls would not have been able to do half the things that they did. He was Michael's right-hand man, straight up right-hand man. No matter what Michael needed, Scottie was there to figure it out. And what was so cool is throughout the whole series, you're kind of learning that they're like a duo. When Scottie was playing well, Michael was giving him the ball. When Michael was playing well, Scottie was giving him the ball, and they were just feeding off each other like crazy. Scottie was not paid anywhere near Michael Jordan, but they said at one point Scottie was probably the number 2 player in the whole league, and he wasn't getting paid very much at all. But once he figured out that, it didn't matter how much you got paid, what matters is winning, right? What matters is being around people that are going to help you win. And when he took that role on, it was doesn't even matter. I don't even care. I want to win championships, and I'm going to have to do that by Michael's side. Even though we're number 1 and number 2 in the league, this is how it's going to happen. I'm sure Scottie was kind of Michael's challenger at the same time. Do you guys have any of those people in your life that are very similar in talent to you, but that if they're winning a sprint, you're going to go try to beat them at that sprint. Or if they're, crushing it, you're going to try to crush it so you can kind of, feed off each other. That was Scottie and Michael. And I can originally think of someone in high school. Her name's Andrea Filler, plays professional softball. We played against each other in college and in the pro league. When she was going to a lesson at Notre Dame, I was going with her. When she was beating me in a sprint, I would always try to beat her in a sprint. When she was going 2 for 3 that day, I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it too. And like literally, that's kind of just how we worked. And because of that, we were able to win a state title together. And I kind of think of me and Andrea almost like Scottie and Michael. Phil Jackson, all right? Phil frickin' Jackson, one of the GOATs when it comes to coaches. I think all I want to say about him is just the fact that he knew his players probably better than they even knew themselves. And he had to believe in those players in order for them to make some crazy cool things happen. And his job was to be the reminder of, this team wants to win championships, and this is how it's going to happen. So because he knew his players more than anyone, that's why he was so good. I could talk for an hour about Phil Jackson, but he was like the epitome of the coach that I want to be. He knows how to push his players, he knows how to test them, and he knows how to get the most out of them, and he does whatever it takes to make that happen. And so I look up to Phil. They would not have been able to do anything that they did without that type of leader, and I thought it was pretty incredible the things that he was able to do. Obviously, we got to talk about the GOAT, MJ. I was talking to someone about this, about like how I wanted to share. Obviously, we all want to be like Mike, right? Like we all, in whatever we do, we want to all kind of, be that good at whatever it is that we do. And we can learn so much from him. But here's the deal. If you try to live your life trying to be Michael Jordan, you're never going to live up to that expectation because he was so good, because he knew himself. He wasn't trying to be like anyone else. Michael Jordan was so good because he knew who he was on the inside. And that was why he was so good. I mean, I'm going to end the whole thing with his final quote, but it's literally the epitome of what he believed. And he wasn't trying to be like anyone else. He was trying to be himself, no matter if anybody liked it or not. And no matter what, he was always on. I think that was the most admirable thing that I've learned about Michael Jordan, is that when we saw him, his light switch was on, and he was going to give us everything that he had. Whether that was an interview post-game and he was joking around and he was funny, or whether that was on the court. He gave every ounce of his energy into everything that he did. Whether it was the Space Jam. Did you guys see, like, when they were filming Space Jam, one of my all-time favorite movies, how, like, almost every elite basketball player in the NBA came on the set to practice with him because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be around the best. Well, here's the deal. You become the best by being around other people that are also the best. So other players in the league are like, okay, well, Michael's taking a hiatus to go film this movie. Let's go to him and see if we can work together on becoming better in our off season. So I thought that was like so stinking cool that they were doing this. That's everyone inside the no individual is going to be the team. So he's talked about all those people and Michael about just how you can just admire how he puts every ounce of everything into everything he does. Just imagine, if you just take that away from the whole series and you do that with everything that you do, if you're studying for an exam and you're giving 100% into your studying, and then you do that every single time you take an exam, or if you study the swing and you give 100% effort in the box every single time you showed up, just imagine how great you could be if you just gave 100% of what you had at all times. Just imagine. The last and final thing that I wanted to share through the Last Dance documentary is the power of having a common goal. All right? When you see it, you can make it happen. And they mention in every single episode, every single one of the 10 episodes, how they had a championship mindset. They were out to win championships. They were going to win at all costs. Yes, they talked about how Michael had this mentality, but they all had this mentality, guys. Every single one of them. If they didn't, Dennis Rodman wouldn't have come back to go play some basketball games. If they didn't, Scottie Pippen probably would have left the team. But because they all had the same mentality to win championships, that is why they did that 6 times. Well, Michael did it 6 times, but that is why they did that for that three-peat to final out this the Last Dance series. So if you learn from this and you want to take your team to some championships, whatever that means for you, the power of a common goal. Come up with whatever it is that your team wants to do and succeed in, and like something maybe you've never done before, but something that excites you and that you're here for this. Why are you here? Michael is here to win championships. Why are you on the softball field? Are you here to win a championship? Are you here to get a D1 scholarship, play D1, win a championship in college, whatever it is? If you and your team knows the goal, everything becomes simple. Every decision you make throughout the day will go towards whatever that goal is. You also, if you have a goal to win a championship, you have to hold your team to the highest standard. A lot of Michael's teammates didn't like how hard he was on them. But if he wasn't as hard as he was on them, they probably wouldn't have won a championship. And they could all probably attest to that. So even if you are maybe a leader like Michael, and some people don't like to listen to what you say, just make sure every word coming out of your mouth is so that your team can win a championship. If it's not, it's probably not worth saying. So make sure you hold your team to the highest standard. Every single one of your teammates needs to be held to a high standard in order to get to the places that you want to go. If you don't, you won't get there. You will fall short. And that's the thing. Like, you're not just going to hopefully get there. Just hope that your team's going to go win a championship. No, it takes a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of accountability for that to happen. So internalize, if your team is to win a championship, whatever that means for you, you have to know what can you do to help the team get there. Okay? Does a team need a bunch of Steve Kerrs to win a championship? No, they all shoot from outside the 3-point line, so probably not. Okay? We don't want a bunch of Steve Kerrs. We don't want a bunch of Michael Jordans, because if that's the case, nobody's going to pass the ball and just one person's going to hold it. Okay, that's not actually how Michael played, but you know what I mean. Like, we can't have a bunch of Michael Jordans on the court. That's not going to work. Like, the dynamic, like, there's no post players, there's no outside shooters. Like, you have to have the dynamic to make that thing happen. Same thing with Scottie Pippen. If you just have a bunch of Scottie Pippens, who's Michael Jordan's right hand, like, you're going to be all over the place with the team. You have to be able to have players that are willing to take on whatever it is to make the team succeed. So what is it going to be that you're going to do to make your team win? What's the one thing you can do this quarantine to step up, to get out of your comfort zone so that you can come back to your team closer to that championship or whatever it is you guys want to achieve? Well, you have to have a goal in order to reach it. You can't outperform your self-image, okay? You can't outperform your self-image. So if you only see yourself as a team that wins, average amount of games a year, doesn't really win championships, you will never win a championship, okay? You just have to know that. But if your self-image, if your team's image was, we're going to stand on that pedestal at the end of the weekend and we're going to all wear these number one, we just won and hold trophies, we just won the tournament, we won the championship. If you want to be that team, you have to dream it. You have to believe it. Because you'll never outperform something you don't believe. So you have to be able to believe it in order for that to happen. And that's what the Bulls did. They said, and they walked around like, we're a championship team. And we're going to win a championship. And they had no doubts in their mind it was going to happen. And they were going to do everything it took to make that happen for them. Lastly, the last quote, which is my favorite one. It made him cry at the end of episode 7. It is who I am. That's how I play the game. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way. If you guys want to be the best player that you can, don't try to be like anyone else. Yes, you can have role models. You can have people that you look up to, absolutely. But you have to be yourself if you want to show up at your best at all times. Michael was showing up as the athlete that he knows he can be, and all of that. He showed up with every ounce of energy that he had to perform at his best. And that's just how he played. And yes, like, that did mean he had to be selfish sometimes. That did mean that, he was talking smack to other players, that he had this internal drive to go after the kill when someone, gave him some hate. But it was because that he knew who he was, that he was good. So if you take anything away from today, just understand that you need to know who you are in order to show up at your best. If you're going to learn from Michael, you got to know who the best version of you is and live up to that person and live up to that standard every single day of your life, whether you're playing in a game or not. Every single day you have the opportunity to become great. So if you want to be as great as Michael, like I do one day, at whatever I do, I gotta figure out what my best is, and I gotta give that every day. And I'm gonna ask for you to do the same, because we're all in this together. We're all in this to make each other better.